Hello, and welcome to God Calling Vocation Vibes. This is a podcast for vocation discerners who are seeking a life of meaning and joy and purpose in serving the Lord. And I'm Sister Carolyn from Little Sisters of the Poor. I have two special guests with me, and today we are asking the question, what happens when a young person who is serving in the military also senses a call to serve God? How does that play out? How does one discern? What does that look like? And how can that be done in this milieu of dedication, duty, and sometimes divine messaging? So I'm going to introduce Father Halladay. Father, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Sister, thanks for the opportunity. And my name is Father Paul Anthony Halladay. I'm a priest of the Archdiocese of Mobile, Alabama, but have been serving in the military for the past 20 years in the Archdiocese for Military Services. I just retired a year ago, October the 1st, 2024. And it was a great career. I attained the rank of major, and it was certainly a great way to be a priest. Speaking to young men and women in the service, talking about faith, and particularly in those places where it's difficult to usually find a priest. So deployed to Afghanistan and to Iraq for a year in each instance. And I was the only priest for several hundred miles for any of these young service members. So if they want to go to confession, if they want to have mass, if they want to do anything to kind of promote their spiritual life or just keep them their mind and hearts intact with the mission they had to do, I was the guy that they would talk to, at least as a Catholic priest.
Praise God.
Yeah.
And our next guest is Sister Deirdre Byrne. And Sister, you may know from a book that has been written about her, Sister Soldier Surgeon. And it's about her life and her dedication in these three marvelous ways. Sister, would you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about you and your role, what you do.
As you said, my name is Sister Deirdre Byrne. Real name is Deirdre. I grew up in Virginia with one of eight. Had parents that were just incredible, centered on the Eucharist, and my father was the head of the family in a sense, in a very beautiful spiritual way. My mother. They worked as a team, and they both went to Mass every day, received the Eucharist. I think it was the Eucharist that really, their love and devotion that drew me. I have a younger brother who's now the Bishop of Springfield, Massachusetts. He was in the Diocese of Washington, D.C. for a good while. I had gone through, miraculously got accepted to medical school and had signed up to join the Army for no altruistic reason except to help maybe fray the cost of medical education, because my parents they had 8 children, but I think 4 or 5 of us were already in grad school. So I did it for that reason, but fell in love with it. I trained in first in family medicine, and then I went back after some civilian duty and became a general surgeon, and all sorts of things happened during that time. But I believe the Lord had called me back into the Army through my prayer life, because I had left Korea in 1989 as a major as well, and then did my military training and did some mission work. And then it was in 2000. Well, I was spending a lot of time before the Blessed Sacrament praying, and I'd always see myself going down steps in my military uniform. It just didn't seem to make too much sense to me, because I had promised the Lord that if I did get accepted to medical school, that it was a sign that I also was called by Him. Because as my mother said, my vocation probably started in utero. Moms know their children the best, I think, and so that was sort of my calling, and always trying to spend as much time before the Blessed Sacrament, always trying to serve the soldiers in harm's way, because I spent my last assignment in Afghanistan. I was both a religious sister at that time and a general surgeon, and was serving in Afghanistan. So I spent 29 years in the military, and it was bittersweet. I mean, it's not always a bed of roses, but the bottom line was serving the soldiers is the greatest honor, because while we sleep, they're out staying awake, to protect us. And so I feel like I'm just a part of another family, the military family. When you meet somebody, Father, we connect very well in
Yeah.
that. So yeah, that's sort of my vocation into the military and religious life. I had met the Little Workers of the Sacred Hearts in 2002. And it was our founder that said it was before the Most Blessed Sacrament that I found the love of Jesus and the power of that love. He's Blessed Greco of this little Italian community based in Italy. And we're 130 years old, and our congregation, our sisters, the habit never changed from those 130 years. So that stability, the faithfulness to the Eucharist, adoration, daily prayer, and the founder's words drew me to the Little Workers. But that was all the Lord calling me to this community, and the Lord calling me to go back into the Army, because they paid for my medical school education, health professional scholarship program, which still exists. But then I went out into a civilian kind of world. But the Lord, I know, called me back, because it had in my prayer life many a time saw myself back in the uniform, and I said, Lord, do you want me to be a religious sister, or do you want me to go to the military? I didn't realize the answer was both. It's, I guess Lisa Marie Carson wrote a book about the whole thing. It's a little bit too complicated to explain in about 12 minutes, but it was all purely the Lord calling. But we don't hear the call through iPods and all that. It's through the Eucharist, through
Yeah.
a silent relationship of listening and also imploring. So that's why I took my real name, Sister Deirdre of the Most Blessed Sacrament, Saint Faustina's name, because it's the Eucharist that I found the love of Jesus in the power of that love.
Yeah.
So interesting how he called you and where he called you. Thank you, sister. And Father Paul Anthony, could you please tell us, for those of our viewers and listeners who aren't familiar with the Archdiocese of the military service, if you could tell us kind of what it is and what a difference it makes?
Yes, so our diocese really is like any other diocese in the entire world, I would imagine. Our diocese is a diocese without borders. So most dioceses are geographical in nature. They cover a certain amount of place. Ours covers everywhere that we have a military installation or a U.S. embassy. So the Archdiocese of Military Services is also responsible for the spiritual lives of Catholics that work in our State Department. And so because of that, the logistical pieces in all this are very difficult. You have to have priests that compass the globe and and places that are really hard to reach, right? So out in the middle of the seas, and those are our Navy chaplains. Out in far-flung countries of the world like Afghanistan and Iraq, those have been at least mostly our Army chaplains and Marines, those working with who are Navy working with the Marines. And so these places are places that are just difficult to get to. But also too, on our installations here in the U.S., we have children of service members, dependents, we call them, that need sacraments as well. So we run full-blown religious education programs on military installations. We certainly do baptisms. We certainly do weddings. We do pre-marriage counseling to bring a young man and young woman together to prepare for the sacrament of holy matrimony. So we do all those things that any diocese does in the world, except we have to do them around the world and every place, like I said, that we have a military installation or an embassy. We have no canonical parishes, however, and that's another way in which our archdiocese is different. Because the government can open up an installation, it can also close an installation. The church with its laws, its canon law, ensures that parishes and pastors will have certain rights afforded to them that they cannot ensure in a military context because they don't call those shots. And so military installation can be closed and then that chapel goes away. And so we have to be able to move with that kind of fluidity of the military. But it also means that we don't have collections like any other parish does. So the Archdiocese Military Services does not take up a collection that funds the AMS. We do take up collections at our respective services on our respective installations or ships. But those that stays with the installation to fund programs on that installation or on that vessel. So it's different, really. It doesn't come to the Archdiocese Military Services. So our Archdiocese, even though it's global, even though it reaches everywhere in the world, we operate completely on charity. So people who are not in our pews, people who don't come to our masses, uh, people who simply love the military, love our mission, and want to support us, they're the ones who donate to the Archdiocese Military Services. So we can keep the lights on here, we can pay the salaries here, and we can provide all the sacramental services that other dioceses do, but have the benefit of having parishes to do it with.
Thank you. That was very informative. And please tell me, how important is the work of the Archdiocese of the Military Services for vocations in the United States?
One thing that we're especially proud of in the Archdiocese of Military Services is that we're the single largest institution which supplies the most vocations to the priesthood in the United States. So between 17 and 20% of all the ordinations for priesthood in the United States have some connection with the Archdiocese for Military Services. Either they were service members themselves, or they were dependents of service members, or they worked on military installations somewhere and were a part of chapel communities. But in some way, between 17 and 20% of all the ordinations in the United States come from the Archdiocese for Military Services. So that's a significant number of young men who are being ordained from our communities.
It's amazing. And Sister Dee, since you've worked a lot alongside and with people in the military, can you please offer a comment about maybe the similarity of the qualities that you see needed to have a passion to serve our country and having a passion to serve God? What are those commonalities that you see as you see your brothers and sisters in the military following their call?
Well, I don't see any contradiction really, especially in the medical corps where I was, where we were always on the healing end of a war. But most soldiers that I spent time with didn't really want to go out to battle, but they love our country and they wanted to serve. And that's, service is the core of being a religious and a priest, is to serve. You become the servant you become the servant for others. I just want to give a plug for the military. When I was deployed to go to Afghanistan, this was in 2008, I actually met with the Archbishop here and asked if he knew of the numbers of priests, because I was my religious life, daily mass. Well, it turned out that there were only 5 Catholic priests in all of Afghanistan. So we had on our post Salerno, about 6 kilometers, not too far from Pakistan, where we were being shot with, bombs almost every other day. We had several traumas, terrible, horrific traumas, mostly civilian, sadly. But we did not have a Catholic priest. We had a Catholic priest assigned to us, but he was hardly ever there. He was always going out in harm's way to the forward operating bases, which we call FOBs. On the same base, we had about 5 Protestant ministers. So we'd have, the imbalance was amazing. And yet 25%, I think, of all soldiers are Catholic. So we were basically, we ended up, there were only about 5 of us. We met every day in the chapel, prayed, prayed the prayers for mass, the gospel, the rosary. If Father showed up, we were a winner. If he didn't, well, we continue to pray. And then and we made this vow with the 5 of us. There were guys from St. Louis, Air Force guys. By the end of the 3 months that I was there, we had a chapel filled with about 80 to 90 people. Why? Because we all are thirsty for love. And when they discover, because we could be the fifth gospel, reaching out to people, especially in these places where we're being bombed every day, it's critical. And these soldiers were awesome, and the people were thirsty to see what was it that brought us joy, even when we were separated from our community or our families. And so we even had some that wanted to become Catholic. So they were not, it was not me or the guys that were there with me. It was Christ through us. And they just fell in love with our Lord. And we have to be that witness. And so the people in the military, they're just so, service is in their heart. It's in their core. So it's a perfect kind of recipe to go on into the religious life. They just need to see priest there to interact with them. And I don't think they have very many sisters, if any. I think I was maybe the only one, but I couldn't wear my habit. I had to wear ACUs, which is what we wear, when we're deployed. Although someone asked me actually, what was it that made me so what I was? This was in Afghanistan, serving as a doctor. And I said, well, do you know Mother Teresa? Because we weren't supposed to proselytize. And I said, do you know Mother Teresa? These people were so, what's the word, blocked, or they weren't exposed.
Yeah.
That they did not know who Mother Teresa of Calcutta was. So then I had to sit there and explain to a Muslim translator who was a doctor, the vow, poverty, chastity, and obedience. They could understand the poverty and the obedience, but the chastity they couldn't get. But it was a great opportunity to share the love of Christ to people who, have never seen Christ. I mean, we are the fifth gospel.
I can say too, in that same vein, whenever I would celebrate Mass in our control points and things like that in Afghanistan and Iraq, we would have local nationals that would just look in on the Mass, and they were completely enamored with the ritual, the liturgy, everything that we were doing in the service. They just hung by the doorway and looked through the windows, and they would always be there, just kind of hanging out and inquisitive and intrigued.
And really, what a powerful experience for all those involved in any way, because when you're in an experience like that, I'm sure you think about what are the important things in life, what really matters, and you kind of get your priorities in order. And that can be the situation in which you really experience the beginnings of that call for special service of the Lord in some way. So this is God Calling Vocation Vibes. It's a podcast at the service of vocation discerners who desire purpose and meaning and joy in life, and particularly discerning a vocation of service with our Lord. And now I would like to go into how does a young man or a young woman in the service discern once they start feeling the awakening of that call? How do they discern? And I know that it is very different for men and for women in the military. So, Father, I'll call on you first, please, to tell how it is for the men.
Yeah, so I'll say that's one other of the reasons why it's so important to have chaplains, Catholic chaplains, because that would obviously be the first thing that you would do is you would go and speak to your chaplain about the stirrings that are happening in your heart and what's going on there. Just like any other person in any other diocese, in any other parish in the world, one of the places that they would go is they would go talk to their parish priest. Or at least a chaplain, maybe in the school that they're going to, if they go to a Catholic school or a Catholic university. But if a Catholic chaplain isn't there, then that man who has that stirring or has that thought of maybe becoming a priest, or has God called me to a priest, they don't have anyone to talk to about that, anyone to help nurture that and grow it. So that's the first place that you would start. But then also too, we have our website, vocations@millarch.org. And a lot of times that's where I will get people writing me and just saying, hey, Father, I've thought about military chaplaincy. I've thought about priesthood. Don't know how to go about it, but just wanted to talk to somebody. So just from out of the blue, I'll get emails like that. So I have to give kudos to the to the internet for allowing us that capability, particularly in our Archdiocese, because with the few priests that we have, it's difficult for oftentimes for service members to find someone to speak to. But by being able to go out on the internet and just look up the Archdiocese Military Services and then be able to send an email, I can respond to that and try to get them to the places or to someone who can help nourish that for them. We have two discernment retreats a year, one in the fall, one in the spring. So we're preparing for one in the fall at St. Mary's Seminary. We'll have another one in the spring in April at St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park, California. And we get men from all the services who come and participate in these discernment retreats because they're designed particularly for young men who are thinking about the priesthood. We're trying to develop some programs that also assist our female service members with the same type of thing. And so just this morning on the phone, I was with our Catholic Women of the Chapel, our Military Council of Catholic Women, MCCW, to talk about those very things, programs that we can develop to be able to respond to how the Holy Spirit is working in the hearts and minds of a lot of our female service members.
Marvelous. And sister, what would a young woman do who is in the service, either in training or an actual service, fulfilling their commitment, but they're feeling this nudge from God that maybe they're called to consecrated life? How would that look?
You know, for the young ladies, it's tough for them because they're under a lot of pressure, especially if they're isolated. And like, I remember when I was stationed in the Sinai Peninsula, I think of 1,000 men, there were only about 25 women, and we were all part. I was the only officer, and they were all part of the support staff, secretaries, or working in the clinic. And so there's a lot of pressure to stay in the state of grace. Thankfully, we had priests, if not every day, we had priests coming weekly. So if anybody approached me, I actually started a group called the Sunshine Club. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was kind of like the theology of the body without knowing, you know, a lot of what John Paul II did when I was in, you know, in the, I would say it was the like 1987 when I was in the Sinai. And I just gathered the girls because like I said, there weren't many. We'd get a pickup truck, fill it with food, go down by the beach. And then I talked to them about being chaste, because a lot of them are not. They're confused about their sexuality. They're confused about, you know, their relationship with men. And so I try to just say, well, the most important is your relationship with God. Many of them weren't even Catholic. So regardless of what their faith is, I just felt my little mission within a mission, you know, being a physician, but also a physician of the body, but also working with these poor young girls who were, you know, in the battlefront of losing their souls because of their promiscuity or whatnot. So they were able to have an opportunity to really just open up with me as best I could in my humanity of not being a counselor or anything. But but it really took off. And I always just encourage them that to just live in the state of grace, to try to go to confession when need be, to stay pure. You know, purity is the key. You can stay in the state of grace and go to Mass, receive the Eucharist. Father's coming next week, go to confession, that kind of thing. So it's really a tag team relationship with the Catholic priest there for those Catholics. So that's why it is critical. I mean, we don't have enough Catholic priests to serve our soldiers. And so, but regarding vocation for the young lady, I myself in those early days were discerning myself. I had already it was clear in my mind that God was calling me. But my mantra was maybe like you, sister, Lord, to whom shall I go? But people sense that there's something more special about us, and that is the Eucharist and trying to stay in the state of grace. And one quick thing is we had a difficult time, like when I was in the Sudan, when I was in Afghanistan, we did not have a Blessed Sacrament chapel. I tried really hard, but the head spiritual leader was a Protestant who was a major. I outranked him, but I tried to use the rank, but it didn't work. We had engineers ready to build our chapel to have the Blessed Sacrament like they had up in Bagram.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the Eucharist. We didn't have the Blessed Sacrament. It was really a desert for us. So that's one of the big problems for our Catholics worldwide. They don't have the sacramental support. They don't have enough priests. They don't have the proper chapel, and sometimes not even the Eucharist where they are.
Actually, Sister brings up a very good point too, Sister Carolyn, and that is, in the military, you think, okay, if you have rank, you can get things done, but that's not always the case. You need to have not only rank, but people who are kind of like-minded and understand the importance of certain things. Just the way things happen as a Catholic. I can remember some of my best experiences have been in units where I had Catholic commanders, because they just get it. You didn't have to explain a lot. You didn't have to go into detail. And even when you did have to explain and you did go into detail with commanders who were not Catholic, oftentimes they just didn't understand it in the same way. And so having commanders who are Catholic is really a big deal. For me, when I was in Iraq, my commander was Catholic, so he was the battalion commander, and he just understood the need for his chaplain, and of course the Catholic chaplain. For him, particularly having to come to mass, go to confession, those types of things, he had me in his unit to be able to do that because he was a Catholic and needed that as well. He made sure that the chapel got built. That was another thing that he did. We had to renovate the chapel on the inside, and so he ensured that got done. And we had a place for the Blessed Sacrament to be exposed, and so people could come in and pray before the Blessed Sacrament. I remember we had a statue of our Blessed Mother, which I kind of unofficially called Our Lady of Corregidor, because that was the name of our combat outpost was Corregidor. And so I can remember many a time walking in the chapel, just seeing soldiers kneeling down in front of that image of our Blessed Mother, who I called Our Lady of Corregidor. So those things were just beautiful to be able to have for Catholic service members. We had Stations of the Cross that one of our soldiers actually drew on the wall. He was an artist himself, and so he went around the wall and he drew on the walls of our chapel all of the Stations of the Cross, and it was great. And so at Good Friday, we had Stations of the Cross drawn by a soldier, and that is in a long line, a long tradition of soldiers doing things like that when they're deployed and fighting. They bring their talents and put them to work in ways that help to foster devotion and the spiritual life.
It's beautiful how you really truly are, like you say, the fifth gospel, sister. You truly are evangelizers in addition to soldiers serving your country and serving God in a sense in doing that. So thank you so much for all the insights that you've given us. I know we in our community of Little Sisters of the Poor have had a number of young women enter who have been in the military service, and we see that dedication and that sense of duty and that great love of God in them. One of them I read about just recently passed away at 102, and she was one of the heroines of the Normandy landings, working in communications. And we've had others through the years, and I also smile at this one sister who is not of our community, but she's Mother Abbess of a cloistered community, and she took leave from the military to discern her vocation, or took one of her vacations to discern her vocation to go to a cloistered monastery. And when she got into town, the cab driver said, "Oh, I know right where it is," and he took her to the wrong one. And so the one that was expecting her, she never showed up. And the one that wasn't expecting her, she showed up late at night, and they took her in, and she discerned with them, and she was so happy and felt at home and entered, and she's now their Mother Abbess. So God has a sense of humor, and he guides hearts according to his divine will, which is how we'll be happiest. So I would like to ask before we close if Father, you and Sister have any final thoughts for discerners out there.
Sure. I would say just that if you have stirrings in your heart and you're wondering if the Lord is calling you, whether to the religious life, as a sister or a brother, or to the priesthood, to definitely keep that prayer going, asking the Lord what it is that he wants you to do? How is the Lord calling you, and where does he want you to serve? Because I guarantee you one thing, he has a vocation for you, a particular, specific, concrete vocation for you. So keep asking him that question, and he will send into your life the people and the places and the circumstances to help make that clear for you. Staying close to the sacraments, obviously, as close as you possibly can to Mass and to regular confession. Those are essential when it comes to nurturing and nourishing any feelings that we may have of vocation. And then whatever you do, don't give up on it. Like I said, the Lord has a specific vocation for you. So if you keep after it and you keep asking the Lord what that is, he's going to reveal it to you, whether it is marriage, whether it is the single life, and like I said, whether it's to the religious life as a priest, a religious sister or a religious brother. The Lord's going to make sure that you know what the answer is.
Great advice. And sister, your advice for discerning young women.
Well, on top of everything that Father says, I would say, just looking at my own experience, sister, I always thought I had this plan, and I'm a doctor and called to religious life. So therefore, I'm sure I must go into a medical community. But as you say, God has a sense of humor and a good plan. And I would spend a lot of time doing what like this Ignatian's, pros and cons, everything before the Blessed Sacrament. So what I would recommend with all discerners is to spend time before the Lord. If you've got some directions or pathways, you put them down, pros and cons, and spend 5 minutes just putting all the pluses and all the minuses for that decision. But in my case, as I did that, I realized it wasn't until I totally emptied myself of my own plan of action that God was able to, when we're emptiest, that's when he can fill us more. He will then send me or you and all those listening in the direction that he wants us to be at. So I guess I had to get rid of my plan of action so that I could really clearly listen to what his plan of action was. So,
and that's a great plan. So thank you both once again for serving our country, for serving our God, and for being at the service of the vocation discerners who have joined us for this podcast episode. Father and sister and I all promise you our prayerful support as you discern the path where God is guiding you. If you have comments, questions, wish to be connected with resources, there is the address that Father gave you for the military, for vocations in the military. And if we Little Sisters of the Poor can connect you with other resources, male or female, you can reach us at LSPUSA-Podcast@gmail.com. LSPUSA-Podcast@gmail.com. And please like, share, and follow our podcast and share it with other vocation discerners so that we can all find the path where we'll be happiest. God bless you all.